So as I was thinking about this morning, and I was thinking on what did you want to say through me this morning? I have this tendency, I don't know why, but I'm like, what are we missing? What do we need this morning? What do you have for us that, you know, we've been looking here and it's over here, right? And I live my life this way. I'm always asking the question, what is this person in front of me missing and what could I offer, right? I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's what I do. And so that's what I was doing for this morning is, God, what do you have for Cornerstone this morning? And it really brought me to a place of we've gone through a really interesting season. We've gone through this really, well, it's a hard season. And we're back, but we're here. We're able to interact. We're able to be together. And so, God, what do you have for us now in this next season where we don't know what life looks like? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what September will be. But what do you have for us now as we move forward? And it's a remembrance of who are we? Like, who's Cornerstone? Where are we? Who are we now? Like, where are we in the midst of all this? And so those are the thoughts that were coming to my head. I was sitting there going, you know, we've been so, I don't know, scattered or all over the place, that when we come together, what are the things that are important for us at Cornerstone? You know, and are we seeing them? Are we not acting out? I'm not saying it's a false thing, but are we moving when God nudges us? So are we seeing those things here at Cornerstone? Like, we believe that God speaks. Are we hearing him speak? Are we believe that God heals. Are we seeing him heal? We believe that God moves. Are we seeing him move? And I just had that sort of stop and go, okay, we need to remember what we believe, and of course we do, but it's kind of it's a stop and go, don't get lost in what's going on, right? Like, let's not forget about what's out there. What does God want to do in here? And what is God wanting to do with Cornerstone? And it kind of brought up some questions of, are you hearing God? Are you stopping in the midst of things and asking God what he's saying? Are you feeling his nudges? Are you acting on the nudges? Are you slowing down? Because we are slowing down, but are we slowing down enough to actually act on them? And the big one that actually makes me stop is, are we fascinated with him? Are we fascinated with him right now? Or are we so worried about what's going on that we're forgetting to be fascinated, or we're putting our attention on something else so much that we're not fascinated? And I'm speaking to myself because I'm sitting there going, oh God, am I fascinated, right? Like, what is my love set on? What is my heart set on right now? What am I filling my time with? Am I filling my time with videos and watching this or that, or talking to people about this or that? Or am I focused on him and filling my time with him? And so that what bubbles out is him. Like, whatever is in us is what bubbles out. I can always tell what's occupying my time, because I'm a verbal processor. And so I'm like, oh, I haven't been talking about Jesus enough. I must be filling my time with something that isn't focused on him, right? Like, I'm thinking about business, I'm thinking about work. All of a sudden I'm talking about work all the time. Or, and so it's evidence to me. I'm sitting there going, oh, Odia, your heart isn't where it's supposed to be. And so when I was thinking about all these things going on in my head, about what we're missing or what I'm seeing as a stop point and let's relook, is the image of Jesus outside the boat. And where are we? And he's outside the boat. Hokey Dinah, sorry. Okay. Matthew 14, 22 to 23. Jesus is outside the boat. And I feel like he's calling us to join him outside the boat. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling. And so it's a reminder to us, and it's a call to us to be fascinated enough and to be excited enough to join him. And so I'll read Matthew 14, 22 to 33, so if you want to. I don't have slides today, so we're going old school. So Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away, so he was preaching. And when he sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountains by himself to pray. Now when evening came, so he stayed there for a while. When evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. I like that, the wind was contrary. The wind had a personality that day. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It's a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and beginning to sink. He cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." It's beautiful. So can you imagine being one of the disciples on the boat that night? It was difficult, to say the least. And actually, Galilean, the people of that time were actually afraid of being on the water, so they were really scared. Even though they're fishermen, they actually didn't swim a lot, so it was quite fearful for them. And so they're on the sea, the storm's crashing, they're in the midst of it. They're tired from a day of ministry, and now they're up late fighting a storm. And they see this person coming out of the watery mist, I'm sure. And they were thinking it was a ghost, because Peter says, "If it pleases you, to allow me to come out to you." And Jesus says, "Sure, come." And the rest of the disciples watch. It's not that they're unaware, they're watching. And they're wondering what's going to happen, because here's Peter spouting, almost daring, "Tell me to come out to you." Like, in some ways, it's a little bit of an affronting comment for him, because it's an interesting one, and he's like, and he gets the agreement and the green light. And I wonder what it would have been like to be the other disciples. Shoot, I should have asked, right? Why does he think he has the gall to ask? Why didn't I? Why him? That's not fair. All are human, right? All the human that we get going on, right? And the jealousy or all the things that could be flooding through, and you have to battle away, of course. And Peter then says, "Sure, I'll do it." And so he puts his leg over and goes. And he's the first man to walk on water. And Peter experiences God enabling him to do what he could never do on his own, is walk on water. Modern day water walkers may never physically walk on water, but they are enabled by God to do what they could never do on their own. But of course, Peter's human. What happens? And his faith gives out a little, and he starts to sink. He looks at the waves, and he takes his eyes off Jesus, and he sinks a little. Slowly. It says slowly. So he's not down, slowly sinking. And did Peter fail? I think he did, at least a little. He took his eyes off Jesus. His faith wavered. He sank. But he wasn't the only failure that night. There were 11 other failures in the boat, in my opinion. They failed quietly. It's often unobserved and uncriticized. But they never got out of the boat, right? And if Peter was told, "Ye of little faith," what was the size of the faith of the guys in the boat? I think Peter was lucky. Not lucky, blessed. I don't know. There's lots of good things for Peter in that moment. Let's say it that way. Because only Peter knew the glory of walking on the water. And when people walk on water, they trust God. And they experience God's power enabling them. They have a new memory. They have a new history. They have a new way of thinking that marks them as they go forward, that they can think back to that moment when you walked on water with Jesus, and he supported you, and he kept you, and you can remember back to that. And so when you move forward, you have a new marker of what God and what Jesus does for you in those moments. And that's huge. So even though he tried and sank a little, he's for the better of it by far. And so to me, this is a fundamental thing that we need to think about today, is if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. Got to get out. And it's scary. I can't even imagine. But if you want to experience that power in our life, if you want to experience the power, you actually have to get out of the boat. You have to say yes. That's nudges, that's things that happen in your life. Those are the things that catch your attention as you go. But those are the moments, potentially, where you've got to step out in faith, that he's asking you to do something. And he's giving you the power, he's enabling you to do these things that you maybe couldn't do on your own. Well, for sure, walking on water you couldn't. So if everything you're attempting to do can be done in your own power, you need to get out on the water. So what I mean by that is if everything in your life is easy, if everything you're doing is not taking a step of faith and it feels like you're a solid boat, you might need to step out, because that means you're really quite comfortable. So I have 2 questions today to ask as we look at this story and as we go through this. What keeps us from getting out of the boat? Why do you sort of go, oh, that's not for me? So fear. Fear is the opposite of faith. So there's 365 fear nots in the Bible, one for every day of the year. I read that, I was like, oh, I need to find them all, and then started thinking, fear not. But, we're going to stand, in front of Jesus at one point, and I don't want to be the person who was too afraid to be out of the boat. I don't want to, of course it doesn't, it's not a salvation issue, but it's did you give it all to Jesus and to God when we stand before him? And he said, I asked you to do this, but you didn't say yes. Why didn't you? I was scared. I don't know. Joshua 1:9 says, have I not commanded you, be strong and of good courage, and do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power of love and a sound mind. So it's time to get rid of fear and walk in faith. Now, I have an interesting, in my walk with fear, because it has been a walk, it has been interesting. Because I've lived in a space where, growing up, coming from a family where there's murder, fear is a very different situation, and it's a little different than what this fear is, but it still is huge, is that I have physically battled fear since I was 9. If I wanted to leave the house, it was battling fear. And so I tended to be a little bit more on the risky side of life, because I was like, I refuse to be fearful. And it was so much so that anytime I was fearful, I'm like, oh, that's where I need to go, because that's where I took it as a taking out, like fear wants to take me out of life, because I could be holed up. And my mom told me a story. My mom likes to train by story, and she likes to teach by story. And so she told me the story when I must have been 10, 12, somewhere in there. And she was working with a woman who had been victimized. I don't even remember what it was, but something had happened in her life where she was scared. And she was so scared in her house, she didn't want people outside of her house to hear her. Okay, so whenever she was home, so even in her house, she was so scared that she had pillows covering her whole floor. Like everywhere in her house, she had pillows, like bedroom pillows. And she would walk from pillow to pillow to pillow, so people wouldn't hear her, because she was so scared in her life that if she was heard, they would know she was there and she would be hurt. And so it became a phrase in our house we have these, you have these stories that are pivotal, and this was one of those for me, of I don't want to walk on pillows. And so my mom would say, Odia, well, maybe we, that's, should we do that? And I'm like, Mom, I don't want to walk on pillows, we're doing it. And she's like, oh, gotcha, this is that zone of fear where we're battling now. So even in the city, like I never had a curfew. I never had, my parents also went to the place of, there's nothing we could have done to stop this. So we're not going to change the way we do things, and I'm not going to smother Odia and have her locked in a house. And so I also had quite a bit of freedoms, but I definitely stretched those. Like I would walk on Main Street at 11 at night because I'm not going to be fearful. Like there's things that I did that maybe weren't the smartest, but it was so much in regards where I am not going to let fear take me out. And I think that applies to this too, is that fear can take you out to the point where what you have to give is not seen or heard. And we can walk on pillows to the place where all the gifts that God has given us to give to each other are not heard or seen for our fear of having these hear them or see them. And so we're reluctant to take steps into unfamiliar territory for fear that we'll fail. We might look foolish. It might be too demanding on our life, the commitment. We don't want to, fear of commitment, because if I commit to that, then I got to do it. And we're busy, right? Fear that it won't work out. The 11 stayed in the boat because they were afraid to get out. They didn't want to drown. All they saw were the wind and the waves. And even after Peter actually walked on the water, they still feared the water. So if we are in the kingdom of God, are going to see God move in powerful ways, we need to be people who are willing to overcome the fear of whatever that is that's out there that's scaring us, whether that's the wind or the waves or whatever, and get out of the boat. And so what about you? What is it that you would do for Jesus if you weren't afraid? If you weren't fearful, what would you do? What would you pray if you weren't afraid? And maybe sometimes being afraid is such a strong word. Oh, I'm not afraid. I'm reluctant. Right? Oh, fear is such it's too far over here. What's the little word that you use instead of fear? Because that's an easier word to say. Oh, it's not mine. I'm just not good at that. Right? What would you do? What would you change? When you think of things at our church, Cornerstone, how they think, what would you do different if you weren't afraid of people, of things, of failure, of what steps would you take? The antidote to fear is knowing that God is with you. His face is right before you. Our focus needs to be on him. Peter lived his life trusting God would catch him. That is how he became a water walker. He simply took the leap of faith. Only let me ask you, when have you ever fully stepped out in faith? And was he there to catch you? Did he let you down? So one of the other things keeps us from getting out of the boat is comfort. So it's kind of along the same lines as fear, but it's the other side of it. And you can use this as an excuse as well, because we're good at excuses. I am, at least I know. So comfort will keep you in the boat. I'm speaking to the desire to live in and have a comfortable life. And sometimes it's boring, but it's comfortable, right? We know what to expect. We know what what my evening looks like if I'm comfortable and I don't do too much. Comfort shouldn't be our goal, though. Believers, what we do and what God calls us to isn't comfort. It's calling us out of that proverbial comfort zone. I don't want to stand before Jesus and say, I was comfortable. God is calling us to be water walkers. He wants us to do great things for him. I don't think comfortable is in the mix there. So I actually heard somebody call the disciples boat potatoes. Like instead of couch potatoes, they're boat potatoes. I thought that was funny. I don't necessarily want to use that word, but I just thought it was funny because I just thought I'm so visual. I'm seeing all these boats, these potatoes running out of the boat. It's funny. But there are people who are addicted to comfort, and they fail to extend themselves. They're content to watch others walk on water, or to step out and do the things. And they get excited for them, and they live vicariously through them, right? Like you get excited for the missionary who's doing that great thing. You get excited for the person who gets up and says the prophetic word. And it's great to be supportive and to be cheering people on, for sure. But what are you called to do? What are the things God's nudging you to do that could get you out of the proverbial, boat, and to do what God's asking you to do? So John 15:16 tells us that we're called to be fruit bearers. And if we extend this, if you are willing to follow Jesus and to be fascinated enough with him to get out of the boat and to go and join him in the waves and the water, we'll bear fruit. You did not choose me, but I choose you, he said, and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, and whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. He chose us. And he gave you gifts, and we're here for such a time as this. Actually, my mother was talking about something yesterday, and she said that we're here, I'm going to screw it up too. She said we're here in 4 quadrillion, like the chance of you being born is 1 quadrillion of a chance. So what that means with the sperm and the egg and all the things and all the stuff, it's quite a miracle that we're actually here. It's one, anyway, I'm not going to try and say it again. So, but I was like, that's incredible, like how much we are here for this time, right now. It's not a mistake, it's not a happenstance. We're here, and what does God want us to do in such a time as this? What has he got for us? And Peter decided to get out of the boat. He didn't do it just because it was exciting. His primary reason was that because Jesus was there. And Jesus is still looking for people who will get out of that boat. And when we get out, we're never quite the same. So what is God inviting you to do? That's my second question. What does getting out of the boat mean for you? It's different for everybody. We all, if we needed to actually walk on water, we would. But this is a metaphor, of course. So followers of Jesus have always had to take risks, to step out into the unknown. We take risks not for the thrill of the spotlight, but risks in order to be faithful. So everyone needs a place to serve. So it is a way that we can serve each other and the opportunity to see God work. And everyone needs to be involved and have a place of involvement as well. Because what we fill ourselves with is what will bubble out. And so for some, getting out of the boat is making a meal for someone. I'm not saying getting out of the boat has to be, all huge and everything, but it's something that is a risk for you, something that is in your comfort zone. So what is it for you? It's saying yes to ministry, it's saying yes to fasting, maybe. It's saying yes to teaching at Kingdom Kids. It's saying yes to praying. It could be getting on, the worship team. I don't know. It could be all sorts of things. It could be something, but it's stepping out. It could be actually stepping out and inviting friends to church. That could be big. That would be a big one for me. In a way. Yeah. And so the big question is, what stirs your heart? I know that when I get jazzed and I get all excited, I sit up. So I say, what makes you sit up? What makes you, you know what I mean? The excitement that all of a sudden you start talking about it and you're like, and you sit up. You're sitting on the couch, you're chatting with friends, and all of a sudden you start talking on a topic and you sit up. That one. What's that? Because might be God's calling you and there's something in your heart that has you jazzed, and he's asking you to do something about it. And so, I don't know, I get excited about that, and so that's for you to do. There's some work there. You can ask God, what are you jazzed about what is God inviting you to do? What's on your, and what does September look like? We're going into a new season. There's a little bit more stuff going on, and I'm excited about it. I don't know, I'm like, woohoo, September, for some reason. I don't know, I'm like, I see freedom. So that was really fun, Brad, that you talked about it, because I'm like, I'm seeing it. I don't know, I have no idea if it's true, but And I want to remind you, God doesn't call the qualified. He calls the willing. He calls the people who say yes. And if you don't say yes, he's going to call someone else who will say yes. And he'll keep going down the line to find the people who say yes. So sometimes you sit there going, why did that person get to do all the things? It's just because they said yes. It's just because they said yes. Some people say, why does your mother get to speak all these places? And I said, well, she doesn't say no. Literally, she doesn't say no. And she actually said, okay, Odia, I want to build this, like when I was 15, we went through a season where my mother was sort of talking to people and talking to the government and a victim advocate, right? A lot of victim advocacy and helping people through forgiveness, and she had that really strong for God to speak through her, and she felt that where this is what my yes is, right? And so she says, she's talking, we sat down as a family, she goes, I'm going to say yes to every speaking engagement for the next year. Are you guys all game? And we're like, yep, go for it. And so she said yes to she's working full time, right? This is not her job. My mother has never been paid for anything she's ever done. All of her books have never made money. All of her stuff has never been, just in case there's a thought out there, it's never been that. It has all been I need to help, because we have to have something good come out of this, right? So it's been the yes. So I've been in an environment where people say yes. And so that is what, it's not, because she learned. She learned how to speak. She didn't know how. She learned. That was trial and error. People ask her, and she was prepared, right? Even yesterday somebody asked her, so how come you're so eloquent? And you can just see her going, I don't know why, right? Like she doesn't know, when you see her on the news or whatever, why, how does this happen? And I was sitting there going, Mom, it's because you're prepared. She writes a press release every time she has something she has to go to. So if she's going somewhere she thinks there's going to be something, she writes a whole 2-page article. Basically, she's a writer. She writes a whole 2-page article so that when she goes and she's asked off the cuff something, she has words that she can pull from. So she prepares. So it's the willing. So are you going to say yes to when God asks you to do something or nudges you to do something? So let's do a little bit of self-assessment. So what's your boat? Do you have a boat? What's your boat? So what's comfortable, in other words? So safety, security, that's the boat. But it's not where God is necessarily centered, right? It could be your job, could be your house, could be your marriage, which is good things, definitely, but it could be where your schedule, I like my schedule. That's my boat, right? I like my schedule. I like to go to bed at a certain time, I like to wake up at a certain time. The boat is whatever you're tempted to cling to, especially when life gets stormy. So what do you go, oh, I need to get back to this, because life is a bit crazy, so I need to, that stuff. Your boat is whatever pulls you away from high adventure of extreme discipleship. For some reason I have the thought of I need to wash my hair. I don't know, but it's that thought of I have an excuse at home that I need to take care of, and that's in part of my daily life, that I need to get back to, right? If you want to know what your boat is, you also need to look at what your fear is, because your fear will indicate your boat. So there's also what produces fear in me, what produces that anxiety in me, or feel of failure, loss of dignity, judgment, making a mistake. That's a big one, right? I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to sound stupid. I don't want to be seen as a fool or fanatic. That could be too, right? I don't want to be too out there. right? I want to be on fire for God, but not too, Yeah, and so what areas of your life are you shrinking back from fully and courageously trusting God? Fear will tell you what your boat is. But I want to remind you is that if you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. And you have to remember that when you get out of the boat, I don't want to not say this, is it does get windy, okay? It does get a little stormy out there. So when you walk on water, it's not always easy. And so I do need to say that, is that, when you're doing the things that God has called you to, those things that are beyond your fear, you're getting out there and you're doing those things, that it's taking new ground, and you're unveiling some of the critters that are out there that don't want you to take that ground. And so you do need to be praying. You need to be in coverage of that, because it is, you need to, plead the blood and cover and, do all those good things, because it is scary out there, and there is parts where we know that, all of a sudden weird things are happening to us and everything's breaking down, and we're like, oh, we've made new ground. It's worth it. But it is a storm. So I just want to make sure that I mention that, is that anytime you're facing that storm and walking on water, He is there, and He loves you, and His face is there for you, and there is wind, but it's good. So Peter faced a choice, as we all do, the choice to follow Jesus, the choice to grow, the choice to overcome fear. The fear never goes away. I'm not over fear, but it's always lurking. But the other thing I want to tell you is that if we grow, the next time it's easier. You hear clearer. You know what to do better. You know how to cover better. You know how to pray better. You know how to clean. You know what to do better. And so it gets easier, right? It's that thing about the next time you have that remembrance, as I said in the beginning, where you have that stake in the ground, is this is what Jesus did for me, and this is how He supported me. And so you can, when you go the next time, I'm like, okay, I gotta do it again. And then it's easier. But it also is the other way, is if you don't say yes, the voice gets quieter, the call gets less, and it'll get quieter, and it's harder to hear that, no, you can come join me, I'm calling you here, right? So we want to be listening. It's an area for growth. It's the area where faith truly develops, is when we take risks. And you find out what gets you jazzed and what God has for you, right? What makes you sit up. That comes clearer. People go, what's your calling? What does God want for me in my life? I'm like, well, what bubbles in your heart? And so where are you this morning? Huddled in a boat with your life jacket on? Seatbelt on? One leg in, one leg out? Are you out of the boat? Scared? Fearful, clinging to the edge, but you're out there? Are you looking in the eyes of Jesus? Is He holding you up? So let's pray. God, I thank You that You are our destination, that when You call us, we walk to You. And wherever life takes us and wherever You call us, You are there to help us. Help us to seek You. Help us to trust You. And help us to obey You and to hear You and to say yes. God, I pray that wherever the storms are, wherever the fear is, whatever the boat is, God, that You would reveal those things to us. And that You would show us what that is, God. So that when we have those nudges and when we have those things, we can say no to the fear and yes to the actions and the goals and the love You have for us, God. Give us strength to get out of the boat. Thank you. If anybody needs prayer, I'd love to pray with them. Or